Now that we've all settled into the rhythm of the year and we've become pretty numb to the perpetual diuretic diet of fear-driven gloom and doom about property conditions that are being peddled by nightly news desks, it's actually about time to get a reality check and what's really going on in the world of property, and in order to help you make some much better informed decisions. And there's no better person to give you a balanced view on the facts versus the fiction of both property past and future than today's show favourite, Simon Presley from Propertyology. Because if Warren Buffett's the Oracle of Omaha, then Simon's our very own prophet of property. In his role as Australia's #1 property analyst and 3 times Australian Buyers Agents of the Year. So welcome back to the show, Simon.
Good on you, Bushy. Geez, mate, every time we have a chat, you put pressure on with intros like that, but thank you. Good, always good to talk.
No pressure, mate, and I only talk the truth, Simon. For those that know me long enough, I'm not into the BS. I'll call it how I see it, and always really enjoy not only the quality of your information, Simon, but the way you communicate it. It's always really easy for us to understand exactly what you're talking about, and it's all based on facts. So, mate, we're going to have more fun today. But to kick into that, I'd love for you to start by looking back at the year that was, with a bit of a wrap on what happened with property conditions last year and your read on the reasons why, if we can.
Yeah, probably well worth it, because it sort of felt like 2022 was the worst year, in Australian real estate history, because every 5 minutes that's what the headlines told us, right? But if we have a look at Australia, it was led the downturn, the national downturn, as it kept being called, was led by Sydney. Median house prices down about $150,000 in the last calendar year. Melbourne down by about $100,000, worked out roughly 10% each for our 2 biggest cities. And as I said, that led the national commentary. But Australia didn't have an entire downturn. Brisbane -3%. In fact, all of that was in the last quarter of the year, and that's all sentiment related. Canberra down 5%, Hobart down 6% after growing 120% the last 6 or 7 years. So, nothing really. Adelaide up 10%, Canberra up 5%, Perth up 4%. So we only got 8 capital cities, Bushy, and 3 out of 3 to 5 had positive growth. Right throughout regional Australia, many of them had double-digit growth. I'm certainly not saying they all are, but here's some examples. In New South Wales, double-digit growth: Armidale, Coffs Harbour, Muswellbrook, Orange, Parks, Tamworth, Dubbo and Wagga. Just in New South Wales, Victoria, Bairnsdale, Shepparton, Traralgon and Wangaratta. Queensland, double-digit growth in Bundaberg, Beaudesert, Cairns, Rockhampton, Gladstone, Fraser Coast and Toowoomba. So it's crap that you read in the media, but that's what really happened.
Yeah, well, that sums it up pretty clearly. And you've got a great slide which will now show that sort of summarises that of the map of Australia and what's happening in that regard. But while we're taking that in, how did the generally downbeat mainstream media commentary line up with the actual property results you just mentioned then, Simon?
Yeah, well, I think at the start of 2022, I like a number of people, released their property market outlook reports. I can't remember the exact figures, but I was certainly very, very bullish on 2022, as I still am now, quite frankly. But the RBA at that time, at the start of 2022, the RBA's latest commentary said we're likely to keep rates on hold, for as long as 2024. So a lot changed. We then had the last 8 months of the calendar year were actually interest rate rises, and we weren't expecting to have any. So, but all that really did, mate, was affect sentiment more than anything else. When you're reading about the negative nature of media as it is, but then we're then given an excuse to each and every month talk about interest rates going up. Now, I'm not saying that didn't affect people, but we've still got today the total home loan arrears in this country is a piddly 0.76%. So don't ever tell me, and I know you don't, but don't ever tell me that people can't afford the rate rises. A big chunk of what the RBA did has put rates back to where they were before they started cutting, and they've gone a little bit further than that because of inflation. I'm a glass half full person. The fact that they've done it much earlier than what we expected is great, because now we can get on with life. But it affected sentiment. So buyers have more financial capacity now than in their lifetime, but they're sitting on their hands because they've been told every 5 minutes that now's not a good time, There's probably a boom ahead, mate, because of the financial capacity and the job market.
Totally. And with all the other fundamentals that we're about to talk about now, it certainly sets it up for that. So let's sort of jump into the future then. I'd love for you to give your rundown on the sort of key lift and drag factors that you think are going to influence on property conditions this year. And with a focus on the facts that actually matter as opposed to the media's metric of the moment that we constantly get belted over the head with.
Yeah, so while we're doing that, we'll pull up a graphic which is going to visually highlight one of the facts that matter as I'm talking through. So the things that are going to have the biggest drag effect on property prices this year include the interest rate sentiment for however much longer the RBA rate rising cycle continues. I don't think that will be much longer, by the way, but that's a sentiment thing for the time being. Some borrowers, a small percentage, but some borrowers, there's a drag effect in regards to they want to borrow money to either upgrade their home or invest, but the way banks assess things by adding a 3% buffer on top of the current rate, their loan might be declined. We might see APRA address that, in a year or so. Who knows? But that's a dragging effect for some borrowers at the moment. And some investors have the capacity to invest in their future, but are just fed up with being bashed by everybody and treated like they're the villains. I say to all those people, if you're listening to this interview, you're only harming yourself if you throw your toys out of the cot. Well, although we understand how you feel. The positives, rental supply. Let's not forget that 1 in 3 Australians, or 8 million people, require rental accommodation.
Yep.
Here and now today, this country with 26 million people only has 31,000 properties advertised for rent, the lowest ever in this nation's history, and 56% less than just 3 years ago. That's rental supply. Resale supply. So that's the number of properties, established properties, that a buyer can contend for. Resale supply. So Sydney and Melbourne, this time 3 years ago, had 55,000 properties for sale. Today, 54,000. So they're at equilibrium. If we bundle up all of the rest of Australia together, this time 3 years ago, 240,000 properties listed for sale. Today, 160,000, 33% less. Mate, there is so much underlying pressure in property markets. People don't realise it though, because as I said, buyers are sitting on the seat at the moment. The only thing you ever get from sitting on seats is splinters in your ass. Construction constraints, the cost to build, the confidence to do it, and the legislative support to do it is low. So it's not like Australia's going to be swamped with all this extra housing stock. So that's the supply situation. On the demand side of things, we've got 200,000 skilled migrants that the federal government have committed to, that's the minimum, have committed to letting in this next 12 months. On top of that, about a further 500,000 international students. So we've got no supply, and the people in the wisdom say we're going to let in an extra 700,000 people in the next 12 months. Also on demand. These are the financial capacity things that are very important to property markets. Yep. Equity. If we look at all of Australia's capital cities and regions, the 150 largest of the 400 townships in Australia, of those 150 biggest ones, there's 130 of them that the standard house today is worth more than 40% than 3 years ago.
Substantial increase.
So about 8 million of our 11 million households have more equity than they've ever seen in their lifetime. That's capacity number one. Capacity number two, during the last 3 years, we created 780,000 jobs in this country. I would argue that everyone who's still in the workforce, your job has never been more stable.
Yep.
And that's very important for buying real estate. Capacity number three, our income. In addition to us having the lowest unemployment rate in more than 50 years, we have a further 400,000 jobs advertised today that we can't fill, which is why there's intense upward pressure on wages. Some have already had a significant pay increase, and those who haven't, I would suggest it's just around the corner. So income is a good thing for property markets. So you add all those things up, and it's probably contradicting what the mainstream media has been telling you, right? But they're the facts.
Absolutely right. And talking about the mainstream media, we keep getting hit over the head with the fear factor around the interest rate movements and the so-called mortgage cliff that's coming towards us. What's your read on all of that?
Well, interest rates first. I mean, the RBA, they honestly don't know when they'll stop doing what they're doing. But what we do know, because they've admitted it, where interest rates now is already higher than where they'd be comfortable with them being. So that says to me that the only reason that they went up last month and maybe a couple more is because they just want to get on top of inflation. And we need to remember that the RBA's responsibility is not property markets, it's the economy. So everything they're doing, I'm 100% applauding because they're looking after our nation. And at the end of the day, when you've got a healthy economy, you've got a healthy property market. So, I guess the global readings about the global economy is inflation is certainly improving. I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 6 months, broadly, the RBA is happy with inflation. And then therefore, don't be surprised if we see some rate cuts as soon as 12 months, right? But I really don't care because there's no suggestion at all that Australians can't afford their mortgage. Some people might need to, make a few cuts to discretionary expenses. So now the cliff, give me strength. The mortgage fixed rate cliff. Okay, so here's my thoughts on that. It's not as if fixed rates are a brand new thing. They've been around for as long as mortgages have been around, right? 200 years.
Yeah.
It's not as if the borrowers who have a fixed rate have an inability to budget. It's not as if they were just told yesterday, hey, your fixed rate's expiring. When they ticked the box and said, I want fixed, I don't want variable, they knew back then when it was expiring. So they got plenty of time to prepare, is what I'm saying. It's not as if their home is a discretionary thing. We're not talking about a suit or a meal at a restaurant. It's the roof over their bloody head. Like, are they going to do what they need to do to keep the roof over their head? So, mate, I think it's more likely that we'll see snow in the Sahara than en masse people throwing their keys back at banks. But don't let the media get in the way of talking about a fixed rate cliff all the time.
Well, as you said, there's almost an assumption with the statement of a cliff that we're all idiots. And people have had plenty of time. They know what's going on. They've been war chesting. They're putting stuff away. Yes, the repayments will go up, but we're not total dummies. We are preparing for it. So another beat up, mate. Let's get back to some more positive subjects. Then I'd love for you to sort of take us around the grounds and share your thoughts on the good, bad, and ugly of growth or otherwise across property locations in the year ahead, and a bit of reasoning behind all of that.
Yeah, okay. Well, some broad reasons. I can't emphasise enough the importance of a lack of housing supply to purchase and to rent. Now, some parts of Australia are all-time record low stuff, and it will underpin the growth. Local economic conditions. The mainstream stuff always, when it talks about economy, it tends to talk about Australia this or Queensland that or New South Wales. Well, that's not a property market. You can't buy the Queensland property index, right? You've got to buy into a part of Queensland or a township somewhere. So other than supply, what has the biggest thing on the demand side of things is local economic conditions. So the job market in town X and town Y. So that's an overarching why to your question. There's 400 townships in Australia, mate. So I'm not. The list is too long for me to say these are all the ones that have a healthy outlook. So let me have a crack at 40 or so in alphabetical order. I'm going to speak fast. Airlie Beach, Albany, Albury, Armidale, Bathurst, Beaudesert, Benalla, Bundaberg, Busselton, Devonport, Dubbo, Echuca, Esperance, Hervey Bay, Gold Coast, Goulburn, Griffith, Gympie, Kempsey, Lithgow, Mandurah, Maryborough, Mount Barker, Mount Gambier, Park, Port Douglas, Rockhampton, Shepparton, Sunshine Coast, Swan Hill, Tamworth, Toowoomba, Townsville, Victor Harbour, Wangaratta, Warwick, Wodonga and Yeppoon. Long enough list. If you have financial capacity and if you care about your financial future, you've got lots to choose from. Get the splinters out of your ass and take action for your future.
And sorry to jump in there, but sort of listening to that list as you walk through it, there's a lot of really good regional opportunities. So again, there's been a fair bit of media activity around the boomerang effect and how the flash in the pan of people moving to the regions was just a short-term exercise. Again, the fundamentals that you've been talking about with us today in influencing on those sort of regional hubs that have got that critical mass and diversity of industry and employment opportunities, plus the continued exodus to lifestyle that's been going for way before COVID, is really reinforcing that there's still plenty of opportunities for those that are prepared to get out there and do the homework.
Absolutely, mate. There's been a misconception about regions, I guess, because for a lot of people, they've never paid any attention to regions until they were locked up in their homes. And it's like, I want to get the hell out of here and I can't go overseas. So they've discovered regional Australia. But let me tell you, again, facts, not the crap that people believe. The fact is every single year, the best, for as far back as we've had homes, the best performed property markets every single year have been among the 400 regions, not among the 8 capital cities. It's basic odds.
Yeah.
And in terms of migration, yes, it accelerated from capital cities to regions during the 2 strong years of COVID. But for as far back as internal data goes, the official ABS stuff, which goes back 21 years, every single year, more people exit the concrete jungle to various corners of regional Australia than going the other way. And now what COVID's done is it's created greater awareness of the wonderful places we can live, and it's taught us that we no longer have to live in the city that we work. Some people like to do that still, and some people don't. So, yeah, it's not as if all of a sudden everyone's going to leave the regions and come to the capital cities, mate. If anything, the trend that's been there for 21 years will get greater.
Totally agree.
Yeah, there are a couple of markets that I think have signs of weakness, but I'm not talking, bang, crash, dramatic headlines type stuff. You might be talking 5% decline in a calendar year. But so the candidates there include places like Ballarat, Ballina, Byron, Canberra, Kiama, Melbourne, Noosa, the Surf Coast in Victoria, Sydney, and Warragul. Not doom and gloom stuff, but they are the weakest markets.
Well, I mean, again, just listening to that list, Simon, when you see times of very rapid escalation in values, it's normal. I mean, you and I have been in the industry long enough to know that to see a 5% cooling off and then a flattening out for a period after that, I absolutely expect that to happen. So it's not like this is unusual. This is exactly how it's happened in every cycle that I've been part of for the last 35 odd years. So it's just getting back to normal, which is exactly where it needs to be, mate. So look, I really want to thank you for your always refreshing analysis and insight, Simon, and thanks again for sharing this with us on the show today.
Always a pleasure. Invest in your future, folks.
Thanks, Simon. Well, as you've just heard, we currently enjoy a very powerful combination of quite strong property fundamentals with an all-time record low volume of housing supply, a national economy that's still near full employment, and continued strong financial capacity for a large proportion of Australian households, despite the mainstream media's fear fiction, and this provides a very positive foundation for the times ahead. So if Simon's message resonates with you and you'd like to learn more, reach out to him and his national buyers agency team at propertyology.com.au. And after hearing our conversation today, let me leave you with a very critical question that you need to be asking yourself. Will you remain among the many who continue to fall victim to fear-driven groupthink and stay trapped in the land of mediocrity? Or do you have the courage to ignore the lemming-sucking negative Nevilles and Nellies, as you would say, Simon, and instead focus on the key facts and do something positive for your future? Because it's those that swim against the tide of popular opinion and take action that always achieve sustainable success. Stay with us for more on your Property Hub's Realty Talk, your trusted voice for all things property.